a given disaster. Speed away from the holy mind. Pride.
My friend ordered this gel polish and changed her manicure every 10 days. This gel polish
Getting alerts from Zoom. Okay, well, I am going to go live based on the assumption that you can hear me. It'll be a really ugly recording if I can't be heard. So, what's going to happen today? I am going to talk about a problem that I've run into with a couple new beginners, and it's always easier to show you than it is to describe it, particularly over email, right? So I've got a frame here. Let me go to the down camera. I've got a little pattern here. Oh, good. Thank you, Kathleen. Um, and when you get a new pattern, one of the first things I want you to do is to find a corner of the pattern. And you can use something. This is just a small sheet of stickers that I use all the time in my journal. And just stick it in the corner and then lining it up down here. And as you can see, it doesn't line up with this line. So what that is telling me is that this pattern is not square. I can tell it's perfectly drawn because there's pencil lines in the ditch, but the pattern, the fabric itself, is skewed a little bit. And I did that on purpose. It actually took me quite a while to get this one to get skewed. But another way you can tell is to measure the diagonals. I have such bad eyesight that it's just easier for me to keep my finger there than it is to read the measurement. And it's a little bit short on this end. So I'm going to pull here. There's two ways I can check it. I can check it here. And then that lines up pretty darn good, right? If this was a bigger pattern, if I had a whole sheet of paper, that would give me a better reference. I can also tell that it is square. It's a little bit short of 9 inches. I go here to here. That's about the same thing. So now I know that this pattern is perfectly square. The first thing that you want to do is when you get a new pattern is to pick a corner, any corner, doesn't matter. Put your pencil in it, point it in the direction you're going to go. Put your finger here to hold it steady, and then simply draw a line with that pencil. And if when you get to the other end, if it is still perfectly in that ditch, then you know at least this side of the pattern is straight. I recommend you do the same thing on all 4 sides. If you find out that it is crooked, you can adjust a little bit here and there, or you can, worst case scenario, trace off the pattern, flip your backing over, and redraw it on the other side. Some vendors are very careful about keeping it on the straighted grain. My patterns are sold through Spruce Ridge Studios. Chris Miller draws my patterns. She has a reputation in the community over, I don't know how long she's been doing it. She was, when I met her, she was already selling patterns, and that was probably 23, 24 years ago. And hers are perfectly in the ditch. And if they're not, you just let her know and she will jump over hot coals to get it fixed, right? So once you know your pattern straight, then you could go about hooking it. Now, one thing I want you to remember is when the pattern is all done, you can do the same thing. Measure the diagonals. They should be equal. If they're not, you pull on it one way or the other, and then do your steaming just before you leave it to dry, which is basically like setting it. Then you're going to want to measure it again, particularly if you had to move it off an ironing board onto a table or the floor. Measure those diagonals again, make sure it's still perfectly square, and then let it dry. When I steam a rug, I like to let it sit for at least a week, longer if I can. I mean, the longer you let it go, the more dry it becomes, the more the size that you left it in is going to stick, right? If you take your rug and it's not completely dry, it feels dry, but it's not completely dry, and then you roll it up, guess what position it's going to remember? It's going to remember it being rolled up, and that is no good, right? That never works. So that is the process for straightening it. Now, drawing a straight line, what brought this lesson to the forethought was that there was a person at a hook-in who was grabbing a thread and pulling a thread in order to check for the straighter grain. Please, please, please don't do that, okay? Because that damages the backing. If I've got a piece of backing that's big enough to reuse for like pins or coasters or something like that, I can reuse that. But if you took a thread out of it, or if as you're going along you want to change where the line is, you're not going to be able to do that because you're damaging. It's not a reversible process. If I draw a straight line on this like that, no big deal, right? Because I am going to go over the pencil lines with marker, and I can totally ignore the pencil lines. They will fade over time if they're left on there. But to draw it with a marker, you simply get the right marker, right? This is what we used to use. It was a Sharpie rub-a-dub. Now we do the Sharpie Industrials because these are permanent at, I think it's 300 degrees Fahrenheit. This one is because it's a laundry, but a regular Sharpie without the industrial red ink on it is not permanent when you steam it, and you do not want that ink to move, right? So once you have your lines drawn like I do here, then you simply, very carefully, it's a little bit harder with a marker than it is a pencil. And I just hold it steady in that ditch and pull it along. That makes the lines, in case you had several different pencil lines on here, you can ignore the ones that you don't want, and you can only, just draw in the ones that you do want. This is the correct way of doing it. So use a pencil, draw it in the ditch. Do not pull a thread. So Katrinka, lost my mouse. Here we go. She says, I have seen people teach that for straighter grain, and I'm assuming you mean pulling the thread. Yeah, do not pull threads. You're damaging your fabric. This way, with what I've done, what I've drawn on here, if I don't want it, I got a whole nother side. I can design something that I want to go there, and I'm home free. So that's going to be the more important way of doing it. So that said, there we go. What questions do you have today? Let me make sure I did all that. I told you about doing the diagonal measuring again when you steam it, and make sure it is totally dry, which takes many days. And when I transfer a pattern, I don't transfer straight lines going through the red dot. I call mine dotless red dot. But I don't transfer the lines that way. I put a dot on it, just like I did, you can see here. I'll put a dot, like where a window frame is, and then I'll draw this out. And then I'll take the red dot, put it back down over that, put another dot, go, okay, that's the bottom of the window, draw a line here. And then I have to figure out what this dimension is, and then I draw it up. It takes a lot more time to draw a pattern that way, but what I found is that it makes the hooking go so much faster because now everything is perfectly straight. When I first started hooking the Village of Pemberville, it's a large rug with lots of buildings. If you haven't seen it, you can go to Cindy Gay Rug Hooking, and then do Village of Pemberville, and I'm sure the image will come up. Um, but I had that pattern is on both sides of the rug warp because I started hooking it, and then I realized that all of the reddish colors are on one side of the rug, and from a design point of view, that doesn't work. My teacher's suggestion was just to change the colors of the building, which you can't do that with historical buildings. I'm sorry. If it's a red brick, it's a red brick. If it's an orange brick, it's an orange brick. So what I ended up doing is ripping out a month's worth of hooking, flipping it over, redrawing it, and this time being absolutely careful to make sure everything is on the straight grain. Every single window, every edge of the building is straight up and down. And it took me from start to finish 8 hours to do that. So yeah, it takes a little bit more time. Did it save me 8 hours of hooking? I'm sure it probably did. I'm sure it probably did. So I am out of questions. So let me see. Cindy Brooks says she's a newbie. Welcome. Ask me anything. This is your chance. If you just got a topic you want me to talk about, put it in there. I usually design a small lesson like I just delivered, and then it's open for questions. So if not, this will be a really short video. Hi, Beverly. Hold on. Let me get your camera over here. Okay.
Hi. So I always have like many questions because I'm new.
Fine.
But one of them is there like a rule of thumb for the pattern size, for how big a cut you want to use? Is it based more on like the motif size or the rug size, or how do you know what size you're gonna use?
It's one of those the suggestions I make for that kind of a situation is there we go. It's unique to each person. Okay? So if I've got a vendor or a new beginner and she's like, I'm not sure I'm going to like this. So I really, I'm suggesting a small pattern. Ideally, one of the ones that I really like, and I don't have one sitting around. I usually have it as a coaster. But when I teach, I pack it up. It stays in there sometimes. But I just do a 6 by 6 inch square, and I divide it into 4 squares. So they're all. So basically, what you end up with is 4 3-inch squares laid out in a 2 by 2 grid. Okay. And then just hook them round and round and round and round. If you watch the window episode that I did for office hours, I was just editing that video. I think it was April 15th. That is how you hook it, round and round and round, although it's got square corners. So, but that's the easiest way to hook a square, in my opinion. You can butt it up and then start a second row, or you can just do the, start in a corner, go up, go over, and then just keep going until it's filled in. It needs to be something you're excited about hooking. I'd rather you be excited about something that's more technically difficult, particularly if you've got some guidance, rather than picking a pattern. The one mistake, and the one you should never pick, is large, empty motifs. Okay? Because when you grab large, empty motifs, you're going to be looking at that and you are going to be, how do I make this interesting? You can't. If you've got one wool, and let's say it's a big yellow duck, like one of those little squeaky ducks, right? You got one of those little ducks and you're going to hook the whole thing yellow. it's not going to look right. And as a beginner, you don't have a lot of wools to mix. So I would be happier seeing you hook something with small motifs, multiple small motifs, rather than the great big giant ones, because those will look okay hooked in a single wool, if that makes sense. Um,
Yes, it does. Thank you. And I have other questions if other people don't, but I'll let other people go ahead of me.
okay.
So,
And did I answer your question? And now I'm confused because it looked like I was answering Cindy Brooks. It looks like she had the same question. This was her question. But you were asking me about easy patterns for a new hooker too, right?
I was asking more about how do you know what cut size to
Oh,
use?
cut size. Okay, yeah, let me get more specific on that. Cut size, what I recommend for a new hooker is probably like a 5 or a 6. They always want to start in at an 8. An 8 can be hard to pull. I recommend a 5 or a 6 because I'm also going to recommend rug warp as the backing. Rug warp, when you pull up a loop, it's in there. It takes a little bit more oomph to get it up, but it's not going to fall apart like a linen rug does. Um, do I have that one? Yeah. Someday I'll fix this one, but for right now, it is my example of why I don't like linen rugs. Here we go. See these loops? They've been pulled to the back, and so they're probably have some problems here on the front. I'll need to fix that. Must be the other side. Yeah. Here's where a bunch of them have pulled out. And this was probably pretty normal kind of foot traffic. And I don't know exactly what happened. It'll take me all of like 3 or 4 minutes to fix that. There's another little spot here where it's pulled up. But you are not going to have this happen to your rugs if you use rug warp, okay? Because they hold it tight. I hooked a footstool, and it's one of those big upholstered footstools, where the sides are upholstered and the top. And my little kitten at the time, she's passed away, it's been so many years, she would run and jump on that footstool and just hang on it. And with her sharp little cat claws, she never pulled out any of the loops, but it was hooked on rug warp. So, and it takes a little bit to hook the wider cuts in rug warp. You need a hook that has a wide shank. So I'm going to do this on a down camera because I think it'll show it better than me trying to hold it up. So let's do this. This one is just a hand forged hook, but you can see how it's thicker down here at the base, right? Where this one is basically a crochet hook that has been epoxy glued into a handle, which is a nice handle. I really like this handle. It really fits my hand good. Where was I going with that? Oh, pulling up wide loops in rug warp. You're going to need a hook like that because if you don't, it's a little bit more of a struggle. Is it impossible? No, it's not impossible. I don't know how many rugs I hooked with this hook in wide cut on the old rug warp. This is pre 2015 or 2005. I think it's 2005. That the old rug warp is much tighter. The new rug warp is a little bit looser, so it's a little bit easier to pull up the bigger cuts. But a wide shank hook will do it. But even if you have the wide shank, you have the white frame, you have everything, I'm still going to start you out as a beginner on a 5 or 6 because they're simply easier to pull up. They're easier to pull up. You're not as likely to pack it packing seems to happen. The bigger the cut size, the more packing people get into trouble with. So yeah, that's kind of the story on that. Um, but that said, if you're a beginner and you got your heart set on a certain primitive look and you have to hook eights, just make sure you have a wide shank hook so that you're able to do it. There. I think I did a better job answering your question, Beverly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The other part of that question is that if you are looking at a pattern, how do you know what's going to fit best? Let's say you're a little bit beyond a beginner and now you are comfortable with other sizes. How do you know what's the best size hooks? I mean, widths of fabric to use when you're doing that?
Okay, let me get out some tools. Usually for the beginner class, I get these out and then I never use them. And then I have to put them all back away. So I didn't get them out this time. But this is, while I've got it, this is that 3-inch by 3-inch mat that I told you about. It's simple, it's easy to hook. Here's one that I use for showing a different finishing method. It's just organized a little bit differently, right? And I think if you Google Cindy Gay beginner square, that will bring up several instances of other people who have hooked that pattern. Here's what I'm looking for. This one. Okay. So this is something that you can make yourself. You see it's not very fancy or polished. If you are in the Rug Hooking Journey membership, there is a PDF that will show you the sizes. And what I'll typically do is bend this over and I'll go up to a pattern. Where's that pattern at? And I will, decide, if I hook this widest cut, which is a number 9 here, I can get a row there around that side and a row here around that side, but I'm not even going to be able to have much room to do that. So that's going to make it much more difficult as a new rug hooker. Where with the 6, I can put a row up here, I can put a row here, and it leaves me space for probably 2, possibly even 3 rows on the center. So that's going to make things a little bit easier. Now, when you hook, you always want to, let's do it with the big one so you can see it. When you put that loop in, you should be able to look at the side of the hooking, and down here, when you got all your hooking in right there, you should still see that black line outside of your loops. If you don't, you're probably hooking on the line and you're going to be dissatisfied with your results because it's not going to look like the pattern. Everything that you have is going to balloon up and get fatter, and it's going to take away the delicate little background space that you have. That can be a huge problem on a more complicated pattern. So always hook well inside the line. Don't hook on it, because if you hook on it, let me do it with the big one. When you hook on it, half of it goes on the inside, half of it goes on the outside. So you're off by a half of a cut size. So that's not a good place to be. So right here, 5 or 6, those will usually be your best bet as a beginner. But the way I made this is just a piece of natural wool. You could do it on cardboard or something, it doesn't really matter. And I wrote the numbers on with marker after I got the strips in there. And I just pulled the different strips in after cutting them, and then labeled them with a Sharpie marker. And this is handy. You can buy something, I don't know how much it costs, but you can buy a little metal thing that'll do that. But I find this folds up, fits everywhere. It's not going to get bent. This has served me for probably at least 24 years on the road teaching. So this can handle, the wear and tear. Then I just put knots on the back so they couldn't pull out. And I did it with a little dip underneath in the middle, mainly because I wanted them to stay nice and straight, because otherwise they tend to move all over the place. So if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome. Okay. So another question that is getting asked from Kathleen on YouTube. She said, I see a lot of beginners not know where to start when they get a pattern. Okay. Well, starting can mean multiple things to multiple people, right? I've got some sounds coming through, so I'm going to mute everybody on Zoom. If you need to ask me a question, please feel free to unmute. But that background noise makes me crazy when I'm editing because I want to get it out, and it's really difficult to get that extra noise out. So all silent for now, but feel free to interrupt me. Okay. So where to start on a pattern? It's like, oh my God, where am I going? When you start a pattern, I don't consider pulling the first loop starting the pattern. I consider starting the pattern when you work on color planning using your black line drawing, right? And I teach that in the practical color planning for rug hookers course, which is an add-on course. It's not part of the Rug Hooking Journey membership, but it is an add-on. And it goes into a deep dive into color planning, all the tips and tricks that I've learned over the last, well, it'll be still 25 years, because I didn't start teaching the minute I started hooking, but I've been hooking for about 26 years. So for 25 years, I've been teaching. Why am I losing? I'm getting distracted. My husband's outside mowing, and for some reason he turned the mower off, which bothers me. Sorry. He hasn't been feeling well, and so I'm like super in tune. Okay. Where do you start on a pattern? For me, I'll tell you both places, but I think in the beginning, you start with the color plan. And in the color plan, one of the first things I'll ask when I'm working with a student in a workshop is, okay, this is your pattern. Why did you buy this pattern? What's your favorite thing about the pattern? And they're like, oh, I like this pattern because it looks like my grandma and grandpa's farm. Okay, cool. Is there anything in your rug that has to be a certain color? Yeah, the barn. We painted the barn purple. Okay, not a color that I would instantly think needed to go in a farm, but maybe they have a purple barn, right? So we would pick the color for the barn because that's her favorite element in the pattern, and purple is a very important color. If they go, no, it could be anything, then I'm like, okay, look at your stack of wool. What is your favorite color, your favorite plaid, right? Mine's going to be easy. It's going to be this guy. I love this wool. It hooks up so pretty, and it works in a primitive rug. It works in more of a folk art rug. It works in all the styles. And then this is its color plan all by itself. And I did a YouTube short on that, which you could go find if you want to see more, but there's more information inside the membership. Then generally, and this is more important, the bigger the rug is, okay? So generally, you start in the center and work your way out. Okay, why is that important? Because you don't want a whole bunch of rug that you have to put your arm underneath to get all the way to the center because you hooked the outside first. Okay, you're not going to survive that. That is going to be really difficult. When I did my room size rug, I hooked the center first and I worked my way out, and I got all the way out to the scroll on the rug. And then I stopped, I checked for holidays, and I steamed it. Okay. And I think that's really important because when you start getting room size rugs, it can get really unwieldy. So I steamed the center of it and got it all taken care of. Part of it was I was procrastinating a little bit because I hadn't decided what the outside edge was going to be for sure, right? So then, as I'm hooking the outside edge, my favorite direction of hooking is from the bottom up. And I know that's about as common as being a left-hander. Most people like top down. I like bottom up because what happens with my fingers underneath, I can hook that really fast. So I can put this part of the rug that has no loops on it, and I can still hook this. Where if this was all hooked and I needed to hook that, I'm going to have the weight of that on my arm underneath, and that is not fun. There are ways of rolling it up with clips. I talk about that in my blog posts on Cindy Gay Rug Cooking. There's a series about my room size rug. It documents it from the day I drew the pattern all the way up to last August. It's not any further than that. I need to get a good final photograph and get that updated and announce to the world that rug is done. But it is done. It was exhibited at Sauter this past August, and it's ready to go on the floor. I just don't have a dog who's going to behave around it, so it's going to go upstairs in my personal hooking space. But in order to do that, I have to move some shelving. So guess what? That's taken a back seat for now. So as soon as I get that taken care of, then that will go to its new home until my puppy either gets out of his puppyishness. He's part boxer, so maybe he'll never get out of it. But yeah, I don't trust him with it right now. So that's the way that is. What other questions? I'm caught up on. You're welcome, Kathleen. I'm caught up on everything from YouTube. How can I get rid of that? Boom. Okay. The other way of thinking about it, let me go a little further on this. Where do you start first? I always hook what's on top first. So if you can imagine that you're going to there's your pattern, and all of a sudden your pattern's going to grow up, meaning if this is in front of it, it's going to be on a higher level. And if this is on top of it, that's on an even higher level, that kind of thing. And you want to take that pane of glass, and what's it going to touch first? That's what you hook first. Okay. So if you have a tree that is in front of a house, for you, it'd be this way, right? This is the house. No, this is the tree. This is the house, right? You're going to hook that tree first, because hooking negative space in rug hooking doesn't give you as pretty of a line as it is when you just hook it from a positive point of view. Meaning, hook the tree first, put in all the leaves, do whatever it is you're going to do with it, then put the siding of the house in between the spaces that are left. Okay, so start in the center generally. Hook what's on top first. Your second row of hooking, your second strip of hooking, should be your intended background color. Okay? The one thing, it makes me absolutely crazy when I see a post on Facebook and a rug is draped over a chair and the caption says, "All done with the hooking. Now I have to pick a background." And I look at the rug and I think, there's not a single wool that's going to work for her for a background. She's going to have to unhook something, because she didn't decide on her background up front and keep hooking it as you go. And she wouldn't have made some of the choices on colors if she knew what her background was. Now, what happens when you pick a background? You are also unpicking a value that you can use in your rug, right? So if I had this rug, this wool, and I want to hook this for the main flower motifs, right? This hooks up quite a bit red. And then I choose, I don't have anything in that value that's close. This might be the, and then I want to do this for a background. Chances are this is not going to work. I am not going to have the stars that I want in my flowers because this is going to overpower it. For one thing, it's not duller. Generally, you want your background to be a little bit duller. And value-wise, and we did that just recently too, inside the membership. If you take a picture of it in black and white, they're going to be relatively close. And so it's not going to work. So you really have to, you really need to get that picked. It might not be right, but pick something, see if it works. And if it doesn't work, pick something else and get that in and start working on it. Try to figure out what will work for you. Okay, so Beverly is asking, can you talk about light fastness? Is it a worry, especially with hand-dyed wools? Yes and no. Okay. There's a couple things that you can do. As a general rule of thumb, if you have more modern windows, you're probably okay. You've got some kind of coating on there that when the sun comes in, you can still see everything outside. You don't even notice that that coating's there, but it'll dramatically reduce the fading. Now, if you don't have that, and you lived in a house like the one I lived in for probably most of my life, we always seem to buy an old house and fix it up. This house, we replaced all the windows because they were so bad. But if you've got just plain glass, you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot. I think the brand is Gila, Gilla. And it's a film. You install it with the spray bottle and a little razor blade, and you just spray your window. You take the stuff, you put it up there, and you squeegee it off. I think they give you a squeegee. And then you cut it to size, and then you work out the bubbles, but most of them disappear once all that water is evaporated and it is stuck to your window. That changes things a lot. Now, that's generally. Specifically, how do you know that a particular piece of wool is hand-dyed? I'm going to give out my personal little secret. So you guys are going to hear this. I really probably shouldn't put it out in the real world, but here goes. When I'm buying wool from a new teacher, I ask them, what's your dye process? You're doing, not your recipe. I don't want your recipes, but how did you dye this? How do you go about it? You put it in a pot, you soak it first. What do you do? How long do you cook it? Blah, blah, blah. What I'm looking for is when the water clears, I cook it for another 30 minutes. If she says, as soon as the water clears, I take it out, that's going to fade faster than if it's left in the pot for a full 30 minutes. Now, what I do in addition to that, and I'm copying it off of several Canadians that I know, is not only do you cook it for that 30 minutes, you then turn the heat off and you go rest. Because at this point, your feet are barking, you are tired. I leave it in overnight, it's fine. What happens now is it's a lot safer because I'm picking up heavy water so I can, brace the pot against me without burning myself, right? And I can pour it out without hurting my pipes or without hurting me because it's going to be cold water. That's going to give you the best thing. Now, unfortunately, without actually asking the person who dyed it, you're not going to know. You're not going to know. I can tell you that I dye that way. I can tell you that Kim Hurt dyes that way. I can tell you a couple people who don't dye that way because when they did a teaching demo, they go, oh yeah, it's clear here. Literally, it was in the pot of hot water with the dye for less than 5 minutes. It was a little tiny, I think at Walmart they call them a kettle, and you just plug it into the wall. And we did that. And she threw a small piece of wool in with the dye, spun it around a couple times, and went, okay, the water's clear. Here you go. That piece of wool is going to fade. There's a chemical process that happens at the layer of molecules. Your fiber and that dye need to connect. And most of the dyes take a good 30 minutes for that process to click. I did do a dye test. I don't think I have that one in here. I think that one got lost. I need to repeat it. But I dyed 3 pieces of wool that were all the same size. And I put them in a pot and poured the formula in and let them cook. As soon as the water cleared, I took one piece out and put it in a fresh pot, just sitting there waiting for its sisters to catch up with it, right? Then I cooked it for 30 minutes. I took the second piece out. Then I let it cool, and then overnight, and then I took the third piece out. I had them all labeled. I use safety pins with beads on them, and I write it in my dye book. The red bead is this one, the blue bead is this one, the pink bead is this, right? Threw them in the washer, threw them in the dryer, got them out, and then stacked them up, and then cut those into 3 pieces. So now I have 9 pieces of this wool. But what I did is I would safety pin one group together, and I stuck it in my underwear drawer. It is dark. The only time I open it is to get something out, and I shut it again, right? I know that's dark. The second piece, the second stack of wool, I basically attached it to a row here, down here, to one of these rows with like some bulldog clips, and let it sit there. The third stack, I taped to a window. The results? The one that was taken out as soon as the dye cleared faded dramatically. And there was a slight difference between the last 2. When you cook it for 30 minutes and when you let it cook it for 30 minutes and let it cool in the pan, there was only a very slight difference. But the one that you pulled out as soon as the water cleared, it was dramatic. It was a dramatic difference, intense fading on that first piece. So it's only a worry if you don't know how the person who dyed it, right? The other way to kind of know if it's a brand new teacher and she doesn't have much of a stash, I would definitely ask her how she dyes. Because an older teacher who has been teaching at multiple workshops over and over and over never sells all the wool she offers, right? So if none of the wool looks faded, then you're probably okay. So yeah, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. It's kind of like buying vitamins. You need to know the source. You need to know what works and what don't. And that's top of mind for me because I changed my fish oil and my vitamin D to liquid stuff that the chiropractor was recommending. Huge difference. Huge difference. So it's the same way with wool. Know where you're getting it from. Someone on eBay might just be starting out, or Etsy. You are very welcome, Beverly. What other questions? That's all I got. If you're here on Zoom, you can simply click unmute. I think that's what it says. No, you simply click the microphone with the line on it. If you're on a digital device, you would touch the device and those controls will come up. If you're on a computer, just move your mouse and then you'll see it. If you're here on YouTube, then the best you've got is to put it into the chat. But I need questions.
Hi, Cindy, it's me again.
Hi,
Um,
Brooke.
hi. So along the same lines about the light fastness and getting wool from different sources, what do you do if you're at a rug retreat and you're not sure if the wool has been washed and you want to use it while you're, at rug camp or whatever? Is there something that you can do later, or do you just what do you do about that? Or do you just suck it up and say, okay, it's fine?
There's two kind of trains of thought on that. Okay. There is Elizabeth Black, who is no longer with us, but one of my favorite people, fell in love with her. And if you have a Chihuahua, I'm sorry. But if you have a Chihuahua, you know what I'm going to say when there are four of them in the next door yard and you go out with your dog, you know what happens, right? It's like being attacked, right? She called Chihuahuas rat dogs. I thought that was the funniest thing I ever heard. And I never expected that to come out of her mouth. And it was like, okay, you are my buddy from now on, because I was getting harassed by these four Chihuahuas. Two officially lived next door, two more belonged to the grown daughter. But that grown daughter must have been traveling every single week, because more often than not, there was four of them. And I think the lady just threw them outside because inside that would be even worse, right? Um, what was I saying? Oh, washing wool. I don't know why. I'm just not thinking today. Um, you can, number one, you can ask the vendor when you buy it, is this wool washed? It might say it on the tag. Every tag that I have, if it's on my back shelf, it says washed, ready to hook. On the stuff over there, which is yardage, it says off the bolt, unwashed. And you get a price break for buying it that way. The problem is you can only buy it that way for a short amount of time because it sells out. So I usually take the last 4 or 5 yards, wash them, put them on my shelf, you know, so that people can buy just one strip at a time. But Elizabeth Black, to kind of circle back around, Elizabeth Black never washed her wool. She didn't dye her own wool. She bought it all, or when she came to teach, I was so jealous because she would literally walk in with her pocketbook hanging off of her arm. And she'd walk in, set that down. I think she had a notebook with her. That was it. I am like drenched in sweat. I'm hauling bags of wool, putting it on the table, doing a full blown workout, walking 15,000 steps to get it all arranged. And she just walked in with a purse. And I thought, dang, I want to teach like that someday. So, yeah, just ask the vendor, Elizabeth never, there was a wool that Terry Dorr used to make. I don't know if it's still being sold, and it's called Elizabeth Black. And it was a black that's not quite black. It's like the perfect black for a dog nose. And they had named it after her because she was the one requesting that kind of a color.
Yes, I think they still do.
Do they still sell that? Okay. I know they got
I
rid of
think
some
so.
of their other colored wools. So,
I
yeah.
have some. Yeah.
Well, that's good. Um, Glenda is saying, is there anything else to prevent blues from fading? No, you just have to cook it. I don't know about Kim. I think she cooks her blues a little bit longer because we've talked about it before, but I really extra cook blues just to be sure that they're not going to fade. Blue, if you live on planet Earth, blue is a color in fabrics that is going to fade first. So a lot of old landscape rugs that you see look like they have white skies. Well, they weren't hooked in white. They were hooked in blue, but they faded to the point where there's nothing left except for, the underneath wool. So if you're dyeing yourself, cook them a little longer, and that'll take care of it. Oh, I missed a question. April is asking, just wondering if your favorite finish is still fold forward and whipping with yarn. Do you dye your yarn to match? Yes, that is still my favorite method. It's actually the method that I used on my room size rug. It's a very hard wearing type of a finish. It's not delicate. When you're dealing with um, a finish, I've talked about this before, and I do think there's a video on YouTube about it. Where it's going to rot is going to be right there. That knife fold edge. If you've got fabric that's folded back on itself, nice and tight, that's where it's going to rot. The fold forward, basically do it in large scale. Get my tag out of the way. You fold it forward like this, right? That's where it's going to rot. And then you fold it again. What happens is that this is not a knife fold edge. This is being supported by 2 layers of rug warp. So the place it's going to rot is here, and that's what, like 3/4 of an inch away from the rug, because in actual size I think it's more like this. And then you fold that, and that makes your little bundle that you whip. Now when I do the whipping, I always baste it down. I've got a needle and thread, some regular thread. I always used to say the 25-cent spool of thread you can get at Walmart, well, they ain't 25 cents anymore. So cheap thread, regular thread, something you would sew a button back on a shirt with. You don't need to have anything fancy. It's basting. You're basting it. Needs to hold long enough for you to get that whipping done, right? Because the whipping was going to hold it in. So I'll baste it. The first time is when I fold it the first time. I'll baste it down, and then I'll fold it again the second time. I think I have the finishing thingy right here. I usually have one of these that is in... Now this is demonstrating a slightly different finish. This is the crocheted finish that you can do. This is lovely on something that is round. It's lovely on the pencil pouch purse. You can do that. But it's also prepared the same way that you would prepare. I'm totally tied up in here. Okay, scissors. There we go. Free at last. So what happens is you have the piece of rug warp. I cut it at 1.25 inches. And the easiest way to do that is with this. This is just a piece of cardboard. It's for 0 cents on my website. If you place an order, make sure you look for the finishing tool. And I just put this, if this is your backing with loops in it, ignore the fact that it has a finish. I just put this up against the loops. I put my pencil in the ditch. And like we saw earlier, I just draw that line, and that's where I'll cut. So this helps with my eyesight issues because I can't see the markings on a ruler without some kind of extra help. So this will give me the perfect 1.25 inches every single time, and you really only have to measure it once on each side, because once you've got that measurement, then you just draw the line if you hooked it straight in the grain, which I think is why it's so important to do that. So it's still my favorite finish. Let me go back to here. And do you dye your yarn to match? I do sometimes. I've gotten stuck on a brown from Cascade. The one you cannot get anymore. Let's see. That's not it. That's not it. I just had that yarn. I was finishing a rug. Okay, so I don't know the number on that, but on it's a brown heather. So it's got little threads of light and dark, but it's basically brown. I used to take its cousin, which was even prettier. That number was 9458. They don't make it anymore. So you might be able to find it somewhere. If you find it and you don't want it, call me. I will buy whatever I can find. This new brown works pretty much the same way. I just saw that rug. What did I do with that? So I just finished this rug for my husband. It needs its final steaming. So it's a little curly. Let's get rid of that. And it's this brown, which matches really good with the tone that I like to use for a background. This just happens to be almost all one wool. There's a little bit of another wool thrown in, but not much. But when I had wool like this, it wasn't this one. This is the one. Let's see if I can get in even big. No, I can't get in any sooner. No. Because if I bring it closer to the camera, it won't be in focus. But this wool works with so many different rugs. What I would do as a test, whenever I had a workshop, the last day, we would talk about finishing. And I would have a skein of that yarn with me. And I would say, this will work on almost every rug. And I would walk around, yes, 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 yes. But the only ones it doesn't work on, if it's like 100% pale pastels and there's nothing dark in it, it's just a good neutral brown that seems to match with everything. And the yarn name is called Cascade 220. 220 is the weight. It's a thinner yarn. It's not thick and chunky. If you do thick and chunky, you have thick and chunky corners. So I would rather have a thinner yarn that I can control and make a pretty corner. And yeah, it takes me a little longer to whip it, but it pulls through. I've seen people whipping with chunky yarn and they're like pulling every stitch out with muscle work. And mine's just slipping through with no problem, and I can go much faster. So the chunky doesn't necessarily help you whip it faster. It makes the corners a whole lot more complicated. But if I was doing something unusual, I would try to dye it to match. You don't need a whipping yarn that matches perfectly with your rug. You need it to coordinate with your rug. So you can take it to the yarn shop, see what you can find, and see what would work. So Katrinka is saying, what color was a beautiful wool? It was a red one, or at least I have it categorized as red. I call it R036. I have not tons, but I have at least another bolt of this. But I absolutely love that. Michelle is asking, is rug warp kind of like Ada cloth where there are different sizes? Or is rug warp one size only? Well, it depends. It depends on where you're buying it. They probably have it different sizes. I buy mine from Terry Dorr at Dorr Mill Store. He has it woven to his specification. I would guess maybe the old rug warp might be closer to what you can get at other vendors. But I recommend buy it from Terry Dorr or buy it from me. I have the 75-inch wide rug warp all the time. And I tend to have it longer that Terry will run out and then he'll be out of it for like a year. And then he'll call me and say, I'm making more, and I'll just keep ordering and I just stack it up. Because I want to make sure I have that. If something happens and we can't get that anymore, that would be a really sad day for me, because then how do I continue to rug hook when I don't have the backing that I prefer, that I think makes a better product, that sticks to my grippers, that is nice and straight and even, and it's heavy. So it lays on the floor like a rug. Linen rugs, because I've had linen rugs on my floor right next to rugwarp rugs, and the linen rugs will always cause a wrinkle. After some certain amount of foot traffic, particularly with animals, you'll get a ripple, and you have to bend over and straighten out a rug. I don't think I should have to bend over and straighten out a rug. I got too much other stuff to do, right? So I'm not going to do that. So I like rugwarp. The way I think of rugwarp, it's like, remember the denim we used to get like in the 70s? You get a new pair of blue jeans, and at least we did. We used to tie them to the back of our bicycle and drag them in the street to wear them out a little bit, right? Because you couldn't buy them wore out. So we would work really hard to make sure they got wore out. But that stiff, heavy denim, that's what rugwarp's like. Even though it's still, supple, it is heavy. It's a thicker fabric. When you take linen is soft and very, very limp. It really doesn't have a whole lot of body with it. I think of that as more like shirt material, like a man's dress shirt is what linen is, where rugwarp is more like old denim jeans. Okay. Thanks for keeping the questions coming. I really appreciate that. I missed Glenda's question. Let's go back to that. Do you whip with one or two pieces of yarn? Okay. There's a debate on this. And let me tell you a story. I was in a car accident in 1996. I was T-boned on my lunch hour. I was going to put some stuff into the bank for a company that I worked for. Belonged to the chairman of the board of the company. And I did bookkeeping for him. So I was going to the bank to make a deposit. Light turned green. I pulled out. The truck did not see it. I am much more aware at red lights than I ever was before. But this lady and all the witnesses said she ran the red light. It doesn't matter. I'm the one who lost, right? It folded me in half lengthwise, broke my pelvis, broke my ribs in the front and in the back. It changes your point of view on life when you can't even get up and get dressed by yourself, when you can't do anything and you're relying on somebody to feed you, to help you get up off the bed that's stuck in your living room, your hospital bed that's in the living room because you can't go up and downstairs. It changes your whole life. Okay, so what I decided after that was I would rather do something pleasant that takes longer than to do something that's miserable, even if I can get it done faster. So it was more about experience for me. I would rather that experience to be pleasant. And that's how I look at whipping. Yeah, it's work, but it's easy work. It's fun work. It's the best work you can do in a car. If you're going on a trip, save all your rugs all year, go on that summer trip and whip them all, or come to the hook-ins. The hook-in, we're going to have a hook-in today at 4:00. I got to keep my eye on the time. And during that hook-in, you can do the whipping, right in front of your computer. It's easier probably than uprooting your hooking station. But I use one piece, okay? And the reason for that, if you use two with every swoop going over, you have to get those two pieces of yarn just right. They're more apt to tangle. You're going to run into more problems. So I use one strand of yarn going through it over and over and over. If you have to go through it twice, I go through a loop twice. I used to be very picky where I would stick it in from the front, check it on the back to make sure that I had just one line of the rugwort between my loop and the whipping. Now I just stick it in where it feels right because I can't see that. And I'm not going to worry about it. It's going to be just fine. It's on the back. It's only going to be seen by special people or for a very small amount of time. So I use the one piece of yarn. So Lynn is saying, I am new to this. I have a frame and wonder about attaching a rugwort to it, especially once you have finished the center area. Do you just stretch the backing taut even in areas that are worked over the wires? Okay. One thing that I need to know, Lynn, is, and Lynn's on Zoom. Lynn, can you unmute? Does your frame have the grippers?
Yes.
Okay. So then what you do with that is, you literally just put it in the middle. And what kind of frame are you using? Does it have a brand name on it?
I don't remember. It's upstairs somewhere.
Okay. Is it turquoise?
No.
No. Okay. So
it's wood. It's wood.
Okay. So if it's turquoise, then it's going to be a Puritan frame and it has two knobs. You turn one at the bottom, one at the top, makes it instantly tight. You don't have to wrestle with it. For the ones that don't have the turning mechanism, you're going to have to pull it one way, pull it the other way, get it nice and tight. Then when you're ready to move it, what you do is you grab that backing and you can grab it from whatever side. I usually will then put my feet on the frame to steady my frame. And then you pull it and lift at the same time. So pull it away from the grippers and then it comes off super easy. You move it to the new area that you want and you start the process all over again.
Okay.
So yeah, I hooked a room size rug on a Puritan frame. Puritan frame is only, what is that? Probably 15 by 10 maybe. I'll have to measure it, see how close I got. It's not very big. It's not like a Chetty Camp frame where it's super big. The problem with the super big frames is this is only so long. When I put my hand underneath it, I can only reach a certain spot. And I hook in that sweet spot, and then when I get it filled up, I move it. Did that answer your question? Okay. What else? Did I miss any? If I missed some questions, let me know. Okay, here's one from Michelle. How do I get past these without seeing them? She said, so if you use one size rugwort, does all sizes wool strips fit? Do you just hook further apart for wider strips? Exactly. Yep. It's exactly what you do. When Terry Dorr called me back in 2015 and said, I have a new rugwort and I know you love rugwort and you sell a lot of rugwort. I'm sending you a piece of this new rugwort. Tell me what you think. And I was like, oh, shoot, he's changing the rugwort. What I loved about it is that I could hook a number 3 and I could still hook 8s, right? When you're doing linen, it doesn't hold the strips quite as tight. So if you try to hook a 3 into primitive linen, all your loops are going to fall out because the holes are just too big. So in linen, you have to have 2 different kinds depending on your cut size. But rugwort holds them so tightly that it'll hold 3s and you can still pull up the 8s. So yeah, you're good for that. Okay, I'm just scanning through the comments to see if I missed anything. I don't think so. Okay, so what's going to happen now is I have a weekly hook-in. It's basically just a social hour. It's a time for you to hook. We'll talk about hooking if someone's got a question, but for the most part, we sit back. I'm usually sorting paperwork or doing something on my computer, stopping to talk to people, as that comes up, that kind of thing. But let me grab really quick. I'm going to have to go up to the extra monitor. Live events, hook in. So let me grab, hopefully it'll copy it as a link. I'm going to put it in the YouTube chat. And if you want to join us, come on in. It didn't do it as an actual link. So it did the password in the ID. Copy link address. I'm going to do it as a second comment. There. That's that, copy that, put that in your browser at 4 o'clock, which is about 50 minutes from here. I usually start at 15 minutes early, so about a half hour from now. I'm going to take a break. And then we'll come back and we'll start the hook in. The hook in's been lasting about 90 minutes. So you can stay for the whole thing. You can pop in and out, however you want to do it. But I hope to see you there, and you can meet the rest of the people in the rug cooking group. It's a little lonely on YouTube, right? Because you can't see anybody else. So I hope you'll join us there. For now, I'm going to say goodbye to the YouTube people, and I'm going to pop back to Zoom, see if there's any other questions before I finish it with them. So that's it for now. See you later, YouTube.